Picture this. You're on a flight to Hawaii with your 8-month-old and everything is going wrong. Your diaper bag is basically exploding and you wonder, why has no one fixed this problem? That's exactly what happened to today's guests, Gemma and Daniel, the couple behind No Reception Club, the travel gear brand for parents who still want to see the world after having kids. In this episode, we talk about how a chaotic trip turned into an amazing idea, how they launched a company with babies on their hips and spit up on their shoulders, and why no, your identity doesn't disappear just because you become a parent. So whether you're a parent, an entrepreneur, or both, this episode is for you. So let's get into it.
Gemma, Daniel, No Reception Club, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you guys on.
We are so pumped to finally get to chat with both of you out loud. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes. Now, you have made our lives so much easier when traveling. So thank you for doing your part and helping parents out there. I feel like you are the village that are helping traveling parents. You invented the No Reception Club bags. Tell us about your bags.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. And we could equally say the same thing about you guys being the village and you guys providing such invaluable advice and creating this whole community around family travel. And I do want to mention, like, all of the content you've made around, travel doesn't have to stop when you become a parent and all the benefits of it. And they really have always resonated so strongly with us. And so getting to really meet you through this interview is very exciting because we know we have such similar values, and it's been part of the journey of starting the Reception Club that we've gotten to meet so many cool people who equally value creating memories for all of the reasons that we will dive into in the podcast. But about our bags. Why don't you take that one?
Well, I think the great story you were starting to tell was like when you were launching it, and we cut you off because we wanted to hear it. Talk about how you had like a 1-year-old basically surrounded by bags. Take us to that moment.
Oh my
I feel like our babies have been with us throughout this whole journey from day one, and really, I think that started with our first and really holding on to that mantra of travel doesn't stop. So we traveled with our first and it was on that flight when he was 8 months old. And we were going to Hawaii and everything that could go wrong went wrong. And you just sort of have that moment of like, why is this so hard? And why doesn't a brand exist to make this easier? Because I think, as I'm sure both of you can relate, it's something in your heart that you need to do, that you want to do, that you want to be able to carry on this love for travel with your kids, and you don't want to wait until a certain age until they're ready, right? Like they should be ready from day zero. And for us, we saw an opportunity for that brand to exist, and we took a real research-driven approach, and when you mentioned village, that's kind of like what we have in mind is we want to design for parents by parents, and we started with our diaper bag, and that journey is so memorable because our first was in our Kickstarter video, and it was so surreal to go back and look at that footage because he's so small, and then our second one came along and he was in our second Kickstarter video. Yeah. So really, like, bringing these examples up only just to show, like, our family has been really embedded with our business. And for us, it's also a way for us to live authentically. It's something that we do on a day-to-day basis. And these bags are so important for us. And we wanted to make sure that we created something that was impactful for other parents that believe this, that saw life the same way.
Yes. So like when we first started, it really came from, like similar to you guys, we're sure. When we were pregnant, everyone was saying, you're not going to travel anymore. You're going to go to Disneyland over and over, which, we're fans of Disneyland.
Disney's great.
Yes, and
Disney is great. But we wanted to go to more places than that. And so we were those parents who, while still in pregnancy, were talking to our doctors and saying like, well, how soon can we take can take a baby on a plane. Like just putting it out there. It's like, well, let's focus on the delivery. But like just, booking things, how soon, we know there are a lot of vaccines, like how quickly, and and you guys know so well and posted that incredible, I won't even get into it, the incredible video about life in America and the parental leave afforded here. But so I had about 3 months off for parental leave, and we really, really wanted to do a trip as a family within that time. So it was very much like, well, what vaccine will we have by then? And this and that and the other. And, starting from that parental leave all the way through to the flight, Daniel spoke about it, 8 months, we were traveling, almost every single month with our first child. And we're just...
When was the first trip?
The first trip was, he was 10 weeks old, and we did a road trip from San Francisco, and we drove all the way to LA with multiple stops, to places like Santa Barbara. And it was so wonderful. It was so wonderful. And like something so cool, so many tangents about traveling with your little one is just like how their milestones become almost even more memorable when you're taken out of your day to day. But our traveling with our first one in that first year really climaxed on that 8-month-old trip to Hawaii, when we were kind of at our wits' end with our diaper bag, and just feeling like this can't be the best diaper bag, even though we had tried so many things. And we both, our professional backgrounds are pretty complementary. Daniel worked in e-commerce. I worked on the fashion side in product development, merchandising, and buying. And so from that flight, like that night after we got off the flight, put our first little one to bed, we said, we should try. And that was sort of like we should try to create something, like a physical thing, a bag that will make travel easier for parents, because we cannot be the only ones who are frustrated. So that was our very long with, that's the impetus of where And
I feel like that's like the entrepreneurial origin story. Like you were searching for it, you needed it, you wanted it, it didn't exist. And that happens so often in parenthood, because you're running up against these challenges on a regular basis. Yes. And the diaper bag is definitely one of them. My goodness, and travel and all of that. So, but let's be real. Like a lot of people have these great ideas and they think, oh, we should do that. Yeah, we should do that, hun. And then they don't take any action. Like it takes a lot of guts to take the action. How did you guys decide, let's actually do it? Because you said you had previous careers. Like what was the timeline of leaving those careers? Did you leave those careers? Tell me everything.
Yeah, I mean, we fell into that camp too. We also had a lot of ideas before that. This idea.
We had like 10 years of ideas.
Okay, so this was coming, yeah.
And so I think it really started with this belief that one day, Gemma and I could start something together, because we have very different skill sets and very different brains, and we complement each other in a unique way that seemed to be like a good foundation for starting a business. So we've had terrible ideas all over the place, and those never took off. And so there's a reason that you've never heard of those.
There are PowerPoints out in our Google Drive.
Like our people.
Embarrassing things.
I don't know anyone who has done that.
The first step is the PowerPoint, okay? If it's in the PowerPoint, you're taking it seriously. Is that okay?
Oh my gosh, so many hours, wasted on these slides. But I feel like one thing that, and actually a funny story is that the name No Reception Club, we actually kind of blocked it all off on Instagram, the domain, and before we created this business.
Even Tumblr, when that was a thing.
Before we had kids. Funny enough, we had an idea on the slide deck that said diaper bag, like we should create a diaper bag, but we had no kids. We had no perspective on why we would have a differentiated view on it.
Wait, why did you block off No Reception Club before the bag? What was like the initial brand idea with that?
It was this belief, and we're dating ourselves here, but we we've been together for a really long time. And when we first started dating, I was in France, she was in Taiwan.
Like student exchanges.
And it was back in the day where internet wasn't ubiquitous. To call each other, we'd have to use those calling cards. Then you'd have to go to payphone and you'd have to scratch like the back and, and then you're like, oh my gosh, there's 30 seconds left. Yeah. We better say bye now before it gets cut off. But that was also a unique time. I feel like I romanticized that time a lot in that when you were somewhere, you were really somewhere because it was so painful to go into that hostel
or the
cafe.
The internet cafe. Do you guys remember those?
Yeah.
But in like 20 minutes, can I get for $5? Just enough to tell my parents I'm alive.
Right.
Yep.
So you had no idea what was going on in the news. You didn't talk to anyone from back home. You were really immersed in that place. And so then when we finally ended long distance and we traveled together, we tried to emulate that. We would go and turn off our phones and go in airplane mode. We wouldn't talk to anyone. And
we would turn off reception.
And sometimes that ended up being really messy because we'd print out these maps and then all of a sudden when we veered off the wrong highway, we had no idea how to get back to where we were supposed to go. But it felt, that the spirit of No Reception Club, that it would only become more and more important over time as we became more and more connected. And so even though we didn't know what a business would look like under that name, we just wanted to hold on to that name. And then
I love that. That's amazing.
It wasn't until 3 years later when we started the business, and we actually, fun fact is we started it under a different name. So we started it, I don't think we've ever told this to anyone, but we started it under Cubby Shop, with the idea being that, you could put your stuff in like organized.
Like a Cubby daycare or preschool. And we thought this is a kid's kind of product. Cubbies are cute, and that it's a cute brand. But then as we were developing we discovered that, the Chicago Cubs, the Chicago Cubs own the brand name Cubby Shop for their shop, the Chicago Cubs. But that was good because then we realized, you know what? The more we worked on this isn't a brand for kids. It's a brand for parents. It is a brand for adults. And we're not looking to be cute and create a cutesy brand. We're looking to create a brand that resonates with us, that is like mixing functionality with aesthetics and really not changing our identities altogether just because we're now parents. Parenthood is a huge part of our identity. It's not all of it. All of the stuff we were before, mainly also the travel aspects of our identities, they haven't gone away. The parenthood has just been added to it. So No Reception Club, which we had, on the back burner in the back of our heads, suddenly was like, that actually feels right. And Cubby Shop doesn't feel right. But we had to discover that trademark thing to make us have our heads turning around that.
Yeah. And I think, sorry for the whole backstory, but it's a long-winded way of saying that we've had many ideas in the past. But, going back to your original question of, how did you get started on this one? I think it really took this this aha moment of realizing here was this this population of people that we were part of, parents who wanted to travel, and no one was speaking to them. And if we created a brand that spoke directly to them, there are parenting brands, there are travel brands. But we saw, there was this window gap, where parent and travel together was unaddressed, and it took some stiff drinks probably in Hawaii where
my ties.
And he's like the braver one who's like ready for us to take big swings, and I'm really more of the one who's like, Are we sure? Can we test it more and more risk averse? And that push and pull has been very good. But when we were like in that bar, honestly, in Hawaii that night, he was the one. I mean, we both were like, this is such a cool idea. Maybe this is the idea. We're really passionate about it. And then Daniel was the one who said, because my background is in product development and, operational things. And it's for starting a business, and, getting the first products going, it made more sense for me to use my background earlier. So he said, I think you should just quit. And I was like, what? What? It all suddenly felt so real and possible and not just a thing we talked about, on the side. And I was like, but shouldn't it be like a side hustle first but as parents, it's not the easiest to have a side hustle when you have your day job. Your kid is like a side hustle.
Yeah.
For side hustling things. And, Daniel was so encouraging. And he said, you know what, I'll work on it, nights and weekends, which he absolutely did. But from a practical point of view, we still need to sustain our lives. And so we can't both jump into this. So you jump first full time into it. And I'll do it part time while also keeping the lights on in our home and feeding our child. And I put in my notice the next month in February. Wow. And this is 2020. And unless we want to talk about it, then March was COVID. Hilarious.
I don't recall.
The craziest sounding thing, because it's like, okay, let's quit our job to start a travel business. Then travel stops. All travel stops.
Yeah.
And so that was a real, curveball.
Yes.
But then at the same time, it was also a bit of a blessing in that, we got to work from home and spend more time with our first.
Yes, which is massive silver lining to us personally. Well, was that, as we had spoken about, the parental leave was so short with 3 months. And so we almost got, more me because you were working full time. I got this second chance while Emmett was still little to get to spend so much time with him in a way that so many other countries afford their parents. So it was really magical and a chaotic time because we were also trying to launch this business, talk to all these people, everything Daniel said around like all of the village of people that we met of other like-minded travel parents that helped give us all the insights and affirm what we were thinking of in terms of what kind of new functionality was needed in our products. We were collecting all of that, also having an actual 9-month-old, doing all of those things. It was a crazy, magical, very chaotic time. Yeah, putting it off the ground.
I love this story. There's so many things I could unravel from it. I mean, one, the beauty of from the outside, it looks like, oh, there's this couple who had this great idea and they've launched it and it's been easy for them. But it's like you've taken one, it's been this journey, not only of sacrifices, but you also mentally this anguish of we have this idea, should we go back? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is what we want to do. I can think about for us, our messaging and our story, for the longest time, we were basically being fake in a way. It just wasn't us. And then when we kind of we had lots of people tell us along the way, you guys just be yourself. You have something. And so then finally, once we were just changed our messaging and our story, it's oh, now this feels right. But I'm curious about the sacrifice you made when you quit your job. Did you guys personally have to change your lifestyle, or what lifestyle changes did you have to make? Because I feel like so many people have this idea and they're well, I can't because, and it's but you guys did it. So how hard was this change when you had to quit your job?
I think,
if any.
I think there's kind of two ways that it was hard, but that it ended up being okay. So one, there's obviously financial impact is probably the biggest for most people. And the second is just losing all sense of imposed structure and systems that, we've come to expect from when you go to work for another organization. They have systems and you're plugging into it, and there are processes and there are deadlines. And suddenly, waking up and being like, it's all on us to figure out the urgency of everything and learn so many things. My background being in product development, merchandising, and buying, it's pretty narrow. It's a pretty narrow background. And the things I had to learn about taxes, about legal things, setting things up, you truly are forced to become like a jack of all trades quite fast, and Googling things, because as a small business, we have to do so many things ourselves so that we're not, having to spend on a hiked up price of someone who's filing your business license when you could probably figure it out. It's just going to take way longer and be more painful, but you could figure it out. For sure you could. So there was a lot of that, creating our own structure and mapping that to the schedule of our son, who was home with us all the time, was a challenge. But we did figure it out. And then financially, I think, a huge for a couple like us, because I think a huge financial part of travel is that it's expensive, and we definitely scaled back. I mean, also it was COVID, but we also needed to anyways. We scaled back. Like, we were not really flying. We were not doing like big trips for like the next couple of years. We did a lot more like road trips in the coast, in the Bay Area, and things like that. So we still got the taste of travel, but we definitely like adjusted based on budget and safety.
Yeah. And I'd say also, just to be clear, that the timeline too was, while Gemma quit her job, I still worked full time. And around that time, I had been put into a manager position. So that helped. But then it was sort of difficult in my mind, because it was hard to juggle both, to be quite honest. My days for a long time looked like, at early in the first thing in the morning, I'd push a little cart to the post office with our orders, drop them off at the post office,
fulfill in our house,
and then on the way we'd also drop off our kid at daycare, and then come back. Then I'd sign into work from say 9 to 6. Then we'd have dinner and the whole wind down routine, bedtime. I'd sign back on to day job, and then at 10 o'clock I'd start work on No Reception Club, and then 10 to say 1 to 2 a.m. would be sort of like that shift, and then you'd repeat that cycle.
Yeah. So Daniel continued working his day job for 2 more years before he took the leap, and because we had to wait until we were.
And that was an interesting thing, because something that I always think about is if I at that time at day 0 knew it was going to take 2 years before I quit, I don't know if I would have done it. It was just kind of one of those things where in retrospect, it was hard. I think maybe you feel the same way. Like, sometimes you're naive about it, right? When you start something, you don't know, what all the different steps later are gonna, entail. It's just really taking one step at a time and say, okay, well, this is gonna be my goal. You chase towards that goal, and then there's a new goal that appears, and then it just kind of builds and builds and builds. But if I had known at day 0, here are all the different things that you would have to overcome before you could start to feel like you were settled with not settled, but that you could feel that you could quit. I'd say, wow, that sounds really intimidating, overwhelming, and why would anyone do that? But looking back, I'm really glad we were naive at that time. And we also, going back to the question of, how do you, there are a lot of buts, how can I, afford to do this, or how can I start this if I don't have the skill set? Or there are a lot of different, reasons. But I think something that Gemma and I were also super conscious about was we wanted to bootstrap the whole thing. We wanted to be scrappy. We wanted it to be something that we did ourselves. And so those examples of learning, taxes and all of the operation stuff behind it, it was difficult, but it felt liberating too, in some sense that,
we can figure this out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I don't know if that answers the question, but
It does. And I think you bring up a lot of really great points that stop people from starting ideas or slow them down. What I hear a lot in you, that you were confident in yourselves and your abilities to figure things out. You might not have known what that next step was, but you had confidence in both of yourselves and in the idea to say, let's try. And sometimes when you have that, the bigger risk is not trying and wondering what if, and it always being in your mind. And so you have to kind of take the big risk, like just go do it. And not to be all Nike on everybody, you also have to prepare and have some systems in place in case there were, issues that you have to fall back on. But you do have to take the risk ultimately. And that's kind of what separates the great ideas from just the ideas that, have lived in your minds in the past. And I think I would really love to know some of those like real sacrifices that you guys made. Like Gemma, obviously leaving your job is a huge deal. How, and you scaled back on travel, and what were some other things that you guys, not were forced to do, but made the conscious change to do in order to pursue this greatness?
I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but this is the truest answer that comes to my mind when you say that. And I think we're a little bit coming out of it, but I think, since we started in 2020 until I'm going to say our second was 2.5, I feel like every minute feels like spoken for, either by the kids or work. And I think that maybe is the biggest sacrifice. Like there's just not enough time, because when it's obviously we all as parents feel like we can give more, we want to give more to our kids. And then when it's your own business, the tricky thing is it's not the same, I think, as when you're working for someone else, where it's easy to say like, I'm going to have a short boundary. Like they pay me this much, and so they get this many hours a week, and I'm going to do as much as I can in those hours, because work is work and family is family. But when it's your own business, we joke, but it's not really a joke, that, No Reception Club is our third baby. It takes up as much time or more than a child, more probably. And it enables, of course, all of our lives, but, because we do this, our own company, we're able to control more of our schedule, have flexibility to spend more time with our family, and this and that. And that is truly wonderful, the flexibility. But I think the sacrifice of starting our own thing is you do work more hours than you likely would working for another organization. So I think that maybe is the biggest sacrifice, like time is gone.
And to add to that, it is also, I think it becomes really blurry where the lines between work and your personal life start and end. And sometimes it's all together. And the classic thing that people always suggest is go on date nights. And when you go on date nights, don't talk about your kids, right? So, but now for us, it's like, don't talk about kids and don't talk about work. And then, because we have to be conscious of it, because it just dominates so much of our daily lives. And sometimes it can be really, you can feel resentful about it too, because sometimes, you might be at dinner and then there might be this customer service emergency that happens, and you're trying to like focus on having that meal with your kids, but then all of a sudden it's like, well, it can't wait. We have to deal with it right now. And so, yeah, to your point, and that's because, we built our business in a way where, we want it to be self-sustaining, and we didn't go the route of raising money and doing the whole VC route and trying to go really big. You know, we're a small company, we're family business, and we like it to continue that way. But, you know, with that being the case, then there are some trade-offs. There's not someone else that's going to, you know,
deal with it.
right.
Deal with the fire. And it's a little bit ironic that, you know, it's really, since we started this company, it's so much harder to unplug and go no reception because of the customers who we love and value. And, you know, the buck stops with us, as it should, especially as a small company. And, you know, yes, we're very deliberate and conscious, especially when traveling, about blocking off hours where we are allowing ourselves to go log in, but we cannot go 24-hour stretches without checking in on anything online. That's just not responsible. And that is a sacrifice. That is definitely a sacrifice with having your own business. Like, who's going to put out the fire? You're going to put out the fire.
Yeah.
So,
I think you guys will figure it out. I mean, as you continue to grow, at some point you'll implement a system and get back to the no reception.
Find a trustworthy person that says you can call this number if there's a problem.
Yeah.
yes.
But don't otherwise.
It's great because you can talk about working more hours. Like, yeah, we have that same thing where it's just, there's always, the to-do list never ends, be it at home or work. Like, they're just, the one thing that's good and bad is that list is combined as one. So now you look at your time and energy as one resource and go, what do I want to accomplish? And that can be, you know, outsourcing someone to come do work on your house, or maybe you want to go do it. So it's great. And Daniel, one thing that came to mind when you're talking about this 2-year journey is, I heard the example of like Navy SEALs, you know, who we all say like they have the hardest boot camp and never been through it. But one of the guys was talking about like the way to get through it is just, you know, get past the exercise. You know, it's like, okay, right now we're running 2 miles, finish the 2 miles. That's it. Okay. Get to breakfast. Okay. You got breakfast. Now make it to lunch. And it's, you know, you can apply that with all your journeys, be it short workouts, be it hikes, or, you know, a 2-year business journey. It's like, just get to the next thing. It kind of helps you get through that grind and not get overwhelmed.
Or a middle of the night, wake up with a baby. Just focus on the one task.
Yeah, it is like bringing up your baby. Yeah, you know, you're just and that's the beauty of it. At that moment, though, you're not really focused on you know, the multi-year process. You're also appreciating the beauty of that journey. And I think that's where the naivete was so helpful. Was we were just so pumped, you know, to be able to think of this idea and then it becoming a real product. Like, that was such an exciting and thrilling journey. And then being able to show it to people and hearing what people thought, you know, both good and bad, and using that to make it better. And you know, it was really exciting. And like something that was really true of what you said too, of that belief in yourself. You know, at the end of the 2-year journey, there wasn't also just a magic moment of oh, this is the obvious time to quit. To be honest, I was really burnt out. I think at that moment, back to your comment about sacrificing like time, was, you know, I was sacrificing sleep and pouring, you know, energy into all sorts of places. And then Gemma said, yeah, you got to go for a run. So I went for a run because I'm, you know, a big runner. And so that Navy SEAL example actually really resonates, because there are a lot of times where I'm ready to puke and, you know, like just just do one more lap. But for me, in that run, it was really crystallizing in that I came back from that run and I told Gemma I'm quitting. And she's like, what?
Wow, okay.
That's not what I expected. But I think there was a moment of realization of what's going to be our biggest regret. Is my biggest regret going to be that I put my best hours for, you know, something that wasn't our idea, or should we be putting, you know, our best hours into our idea? And if it didn't work, at least we knew we tried our hardest, and we gave it our
we went all in,
and there was no lack of effort or will to you know, bring this to life. But if it didn't work because I didn't try hard enough, I think that would be the biggest regret. And so to your point of what you said, it is a leap of faith. You have to take that leap of faith. You have to go all in. The just do it mantra that you mentioned, I really believe in that.
I also think there's something so strong about what you're saying about like, Gemma, you encouraged him to go take that run, like take time for yourself, which I think it's so necessary in parenthood. And also I think often, unfortunately on moms, like sometimes looked down upon, but what you're standing for is go take that time for yourself on the run. And also with no reception, you're saying parents, your journey matters too. So I feel like it's like a common thread in what you do and what makes you so successful of like everybody's journey matters. Like things don't end when parenthood begins. Like entrepreneurship doesn't end, travel doesn't end. All of these notes that I feel like are coming through in kind of like your family ethos.
100%. You know, during pregnancy, we had both separately read the book Bringing Up Baby, which was more trendy, I think, at that time. I don't know if anyone reads that now. And, you know,
I read it.
I loved it. We both loved it. And
We tried to move to France because of it.
guys, we need to have a whole conversation about that.
I know.
France so much. But, you know, the biggest takeaway from that book for us and maybe for you as well is, you know, there can be this feeling or this pressure that when you become a parent, it's almost like your needs as a person are deleted and replaced by your kids. And that's not good. And that book really, it felt like it was celebrating how about we value the needs of every member of the family, even the grownups. And I think that was so affirming. And it was something we already, I think, believed, but, you know, we didn't have kids yet and we didn't know how to articulate it. And that book was really great, was really, really good. And it's something that we have very much tried to carry through with No Reception Club, with why your adventure, your journey doesn't stop. You know, it's now enriched and dramatically changed with the addition of a kid. But it doesn't stop. It doesn't mean that everything is only about going through the filter of like what they want. It's what we want. What does the whole family benefit from?
I think that's a small shift in the thought process, but that yields huge results because it allows you, it gives you the confidence to make decisions in a certain way and not feel guilty or bad about it. So it's a really small thing that will change how you parent.
100%. It will change the next 2 decades.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
because you do want to spoil your child, however that might be, but you also want to take care of yourself, and those both can be true.
Yeah, that idea of like putting on your oxygen mask before helping others.
Right.
That's kind of like what I go back to.
And they see it. You know, if you never took care of yourself, be it, you know, going to work out or taking that time, if you never did that, then they may not either. But if they see it, you know, there might be a time or two where they're like, come play with me. I want to do this. I don't want to do whatever. It's like, but then soon they figure it out, and then they all of a sudden they're in the gym with you, like lifting up kettlebells, and they just realize it's a part of life.
Yep.
Yeah. And that decision to move to France, you know, how did that come about for you two?
Oh boy.
Curious about this, guys.
Wax, how did it first come about?
Well, we had talked about trying to live abroad for a long time.
Well, you got your passport.
I got my Italian citizenship and passport, and then so did our daughter. So that afforded us the ability to live anywhere in the EU. And so once we got that about a year ago, it kind of opened up these options of like, okay, well then what are we waiting for? If we keep talking about this, like someday we should try living there for a year or however long. Seems like there's never a great time, but this could be a good time. And then so we did it. And then like right before, you know, less than 2 weeks before I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, oh, is this a good time? Maybe it's not. I don't know. But like we're already going. We already rented our house out in New Jersey. It would be like too much to not go at this point.
I mean, so we could have not gone.
I guess we could have not gone.
Looking back.
It was a hard time to be pregnant first trimester there.
God, it's so tough.
I know.
I mean, the whole thing was tough because not only was she having morning sickness, it's like, well, then now I'm trying to navigate a grocery store and get things that she might want. And then it, even simple things like saltines. It's like they have saltines, but they're not the same. So you're like, okay, thanks. And
You just want some creature comfort.
and then
in that.
it was very, very tough, and you were exhausted. And then it's like trying to navigate this whole new world with a toddler as well. We did get lucky as we had one of the best nannies ever, and she was an American who moved. She grew up in Belgium, moved to France, and so she was very, very helpful. But it was just too much. And then one day you were like, "Hey, should we put our notice in?" And I was like,
discreet.
you were having a really bad day.
And I was like, I just ultimately going to my doctor's appointments and everything, I just didn't feel safe delivering in France. Not that they have a bad system. It was just a personal thing. I needed, I needed my doctor. I really missed my provider, that feeling of safety in order to deliver in such a vulnerable time. I was like, there's a lot of things I can push through and put my athlete brain in and go. And this was something that I was like, it's impacting my mental health in a negative way in a really vulnerable time.
Yeah.
Maybe the strong thing to do is to take care of myself, my body, my family, and go home. And if we want to, again, we can try again later. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. However, for right now, this is the best decision.
For quite a while.
Yeah. Well,
for a few years, definitely for a few years, we're settled here. So
I can totally relate to that so much, Colette. With we were contemplating a move, and we became pregnant with our second, and I knew it. We are delivering with Dr. Green. She did a great job the first time, and there is no way that I'm not delivering with Dr. Green. There's just no way. It's already such a vulnerable. I was quite anxious throughout my pregnancy. And it's like, I'm not about to get creative and experimental in this area. This is not a place to be, rolling the dice.
There's a time to get creative and expand and try new things. And then there's a time that's not. And I think if there's such strength in figuring out what that is for you guys and for us. And it's a bummer in some ways. I'm like, oh man, that could have been really cool. And I'm also really proud of us for trying, because the test is the experience. We went there going for a temporary period of time in order to then come back. And it's just that our time was a bit shorter, but we learned a lot.
You made the best decisions at every point based on the information you had at the time.
Yeah. It was all big
That's
tests.
always changing.
And I actually think that's a harder thing to do, right? Which is there's this whole sunk cost belief system where, you made this decision for XYZ reason and you want to stick to that decision. But actually the harder thing to do is to take the new information you have now, pivot, adjust, and make the, the decision that makes the most sense right now.
Yes.
A lot of people can't step away because maybe it's our egos, maybe it's who we see, who we wish we were, all these different things. But then at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is how do you take care of your needs and make sure that foundation is strong, because everything else flows from that, and I think it's a courageous thing to do, but kudos to you. I feel like it didn't seem that short because looking at the content, it goes because I actually, fun fact is I spent a year in Nice and I studied there, and I was like, I wish all this content was around when I was there, because I definitely didn't see the same places, but it looked really cool, all the different places that you guys checked out.
Yeah, we tried to squeeze a lot in as we,
especially towards the end.
Yeah.
Towards the end, it was like, let's go. Let's just see what
because
we
had an end date in mind. Yeah. But I mean, there were a few end dates we had to have, because one, there was the ending of not being able to fly during pregnancy, and then also, even though I'm an Italian citizen, Scott is not. So visa situation, there was a time limit there as well.
It was either we pursued getting a visa for me, which would have we could have extended maybe a month, or we just left at the end of the 90 days. So that's what we did.
It sounds like the right decision. And as you know, you can always go back, and you probably will.
Yeah.
At least to visit.
Daniel, it's interesting, some of the stuff you talked about like making a change in the decision. I feel like so often we get these interesting like queries from friends and people we talk to about like wanting to make a change in their life, because what they've done is they've kind of got stuck in the rat race. You know, they've built their life creep has gotten so large. And then you kind of hit them with some challenging questions of like, because that's why I was so curious about the sacrifices that you had to make when you quit your job, because you had 2 incomes, now you don't. You only have 1 income. And I mean, so many people, you're right, they get caught up in like, it's either their ego or whatever. And it's like, you have to make a sacrifice if you want this change. Are you willing to make that? And sometimes it's much greater than they want to. And sometimes they're just tied to this ego of whatever, their house, their car. It's like you can reset all of that within some means to really change what you want your life to be. So it's cool to see.
I think some of that came from the very first job that I had, which is I've had multiple I'm sure all of us have had different career arcs. It's never a linear journey, but at the outset, right after school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I kind of just followed the herd, and I found myself in this world of investment banking. And so, if you can picture investment bankers, everyone's wearing fancy suits and
only
Matthew McConaughey off of Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Yes, that is actually not too far from the truth.
Disturbingly, yes.
And so it was an eye-opening experience because in many ways, I was thrown into this world where I think everyone's goal there was obviously to pursue something that was intellectually stimulating, that was fulfilling, and also that they loved doing. But a big underlying factor was money too. Everyone goes in that profession because they want to show that intellectual curiosity and stimulation, like they can not only do it, but they can earn the most money. And in that world, actually, most of your income comes from a bonus. So you have a regular base salary throughout the year, but actually most of your earnings comes at this one moment in time, which is your bonus. And it reflects a combination of how well your company is doing, but then also your individual contribution. And so inevitably, you are comparing your bonus to other people's bonus. And so I think that's a really crude way of looking at your value, right? It is actually very tangible. Like, this is my value. And I don't have a lot of memories of those different bonus days of true happiness. It would come and it'd be, for different people, like a lot of money, but I don't think that. I think for some, I think it's like you experience it in different ways, obviously. But in that moment, you're just like, oh, like, what was that? I think there's like an internal calculation of like, was that worth it?
Was it worth working sweatshop hours? Was that actually worth it?
And that was the worst time of my life. I worked consistently from 9 till I don't know. So like a good day was 1 a.m. A good day was 1 a.m. Sometimes I pulled all-nighters at the office. There was a nap room in the office. And so what I would do sometimes is I'd bring my change of clothes to the office. I had a membership at the cheapest gym there. I'd go into that gym as soon as it opened, shower, change into. So sometimes I didn't go home, is what I'm trying to say. And then, there was a time too where it was my dad's birthday. We had made a reservation to go out for dinner. And like a minute before the dinner started, because I called my boss, I was like, can I at least go to my dad's birthday? It was on a weekend too. It was like a Saturday. And he said, no, you have to come to the office. And I was like, I was so crushed, that like my life was controlled in such a like tight way by someone else. And at that time, I'm justifying it. Like I will have to go to work because I need to get my bonus. So that's the whole carrot at the end of the, on stick. It is like everything was motivated by this bonus. And so I think, first job out of college, like that was my day-to-day reality. And I think there was something liberating of seeing, all my bosses, all the way up through the chain. It was like, do I want that life? And I'm young enough at this point where I don't have to choose this life if it wasn't for me. And it was liberating to know that like if I didn't scale up my expenses to the point where I need that bonus all the time, then I'm empowered to make other choices because I'm not dependent on that, right? And so I think that's how Gemma and I have tried to live is that our lives aren't dependent on an extravagant amount of expenses that we can no longer afford if our business doesn't hit XYZ. It's sort of, this is the base case scenario of the business. Let's live in a means below that. Mm-hmm. And then if we grow beyond that, great. But if we don't, at least it's not something that's going to self-combust and create this, negative spiral. And so to go back to your question, Scott, I think it takes, I guess maybe the first step is just that awareness of, what is, the goal or dream that you're chasing. And for us, I think we were chasing passion before money, if that makes sense. And then, if you were in alignment with that passion and you felt so fulfilled by that passion that you could work the hardest, towards that end goal, and no one believed in it more than you, then, I think you should be successful in that area, right? But to that point where you don't feel that same conviction. And for me, I did it in finance, and I knew that I probably wouldn't be as successful as my peers because my heart wasn't in it. Then I think that's a sign. And so, I have similar conversations with my friends who are kind of deciding, hey, do I stay in my day job or do I go through the passion and do the side hustle? I think the answer is it depends, and I'm sure you sort of feel the same way as you kind of like ask follow-up questions about maybe the side hustle or the passion. You can tell if someone's heart is into it. And usually it kind of comes down to if someone can't imagine doing anything else but that passion, then maybe hold. But if they can't imagine doing anything else but that passion, you have to go for it. Yeah. But it's a moment where they're just, hesitating a little bit or a lot, and it's just one of many ideas that they're entertaining, then, it maybe some deliberation or some further exploration might need to happen. But I guess I don't know your origin story. Like, did you guys both know that this was going to be the path, or how did you know that this was going to be the path?
I don't even know what path we're on right now.
No, to answer your question, no. Scott was a chemical engineer. I was in advertising, writing, producing. And so I think they both work together because they're so different, like we have different mindsets on things, similar to you guys.
I'm the one who's like, let's do this. Let's like you said, wait a second, pull it back.
Yeah, you need both.
Yeah, you need both.
You need both. And that's what makes the couple. We both bonded over a love of travel, just going, on great trips together to Thailand and Mexico and all these places when we were dating. And then it was a podcast that was really what inspired us to take the leap with Tim Ferriss and Rolf Potts. Rolf Potts wrote Vagabonding, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. And
she came home and we were eating dinner, I remember, and she goes, hey, what if we just traveled? Like, really, like, quit our jobs and traveled for like 6 months or a year. And I was like, what? I was like, you crazy? And then we talked, and I was like, I'll listen to the podcast tomorrow. And on the way to work, listen to it. And I was so underwhelmed with my job. I was literally working like actual work at the office was like 2 hours a week. And the rest of it was like trying to figure out some type of side hustle or do something else. Yeah. And so I had all this free time. So I basically just like sent her all these emails. I was like, this is what we need to do beforehand. These are kind of our like sticking points. These are go, no. And it came down to like, if we can rent our house out for our mortgage, we can go. And so Colette put it on the market. And then I remember we're like, I don't know, can we cover our mortgage? And then you were like, what if I put it over like 500 more? Like, that seems crazy. No one's going to spend that much for rent. And we ended up getting, I don't remember the exact numbers, but like, some extra cash flow as well. And so then within 6 weeks of the conversation, we were on our way to Rio on a one-way flight, did what was supposed to be 7 months, turned out to be an 18-month trip around the world. Wow. During that time period, we kind of saw what everyone else like, oh, people are making a living, at the time wasn't really called it, but like creating content. So we're like, let's kind of figure this out. And then all of a sudden I remember we had like our first paying job was like a trip to Jamaica. And we're like, we don't want to go back to our normal job. So then we, at some point we lived in like a 1-bedroom apartment and we still had our house rented out. And then, that was 9 years ago.
Almost 10.
Almost 10 years ago.
What reminds me of like your origin story, our origin story, when I actually think about the time of when this idea came to be, we were trying a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. You were inventing a product, I remember. Mm-hmm. And I was trying more like on-camera hosting, and we always tried to invent products together. We had all these different ideas. There's PowerPoints. There's a lot of emails. There's different websites that were developed. Yeah. So it's not the first iteration, right? Like you practice, and I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
And what's funny is some of our ideas, obviously, ideas worthless, execution's everything, is like I've seen them come to market, the exact ideas, and I was like, oh, if we would have just stuck with it. Like one was Kodiak cakes, like the protein pancakes. Like we literally we called them some power cakes or something. It was like the whole idea, and we started down it, and we just never executed it. I'm like, oh, that was a big one.
Yeah. Sounds like you there were some better ideas. None of our ideas actually hit the market. So, but I feel like, you're right. Everyone kind of sees the polished end product, but there's a lot of work and practice. I like that word, practice. You have to go through the loops and then a lot of failures too. And it's those failures that lead to the growth. But how do you end up having that persistence to go through? Because I'm sure there are moments where, and we've had those moments where it's like, oh, are we doing the right thing, or should we go back to our regular jobs? Like, how was it always unwavering for you?
Oh.
No, not at all. I think.
I had like nightmares and dreams that I had to go back to work for like 2 years. I would have these dreams that I had to go back to school. I'd have these dreams that I had to go back to work. And I just did not feel comfortable in my skin. I'd probably say like 3 years before I finally was like, oh, this is what we're doing. Because it's this, it'd be one thing to like invent a product and like see the sales and the growth. What we were doing was just so new. It was very scary to think we're staking our livelihood on this. And yes, there were plenty of people out there doing it, but it was just so hard for my mind to like really get comfortable in it. And so it took a while.
It did take a while. I think it was around 7 months in, I got a job offer back in Los Angeles, and on paper, I think it was an awesome company, great women. And I was like backpedaling, and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I should take this back to like, because we were living this life that prior to Roamaroo, that was like so great on paper, like the great university, the great job, like bought a house, got married, all these things like that we should be doing by the American dream standard. Yes. Like, why aren't we fulfilled? So then we take this risk, and we're living as cheaply as possible, and we're trying out this idea. And then I get this opportunity to go back to what life was. And
So confused.
I should do this. And you're like, why are you like backpedaling? Like when you want something, you go full force and you're not going.
Sure.
And at that point we had changed, like travel had changed us. We had evolved, and to go back to what life was really felt like kind of going backwards, even though it was probably by most standards what I should have done, like, or maybe what would have made other people comfortable.
Probably
with
more
my pursuit.
Mhm.
Yeah. Not what I should have done in my belief system. But in terms of what other people maybe were saying. And then, we passed, and that's really like when it all began, when you didn't have something, that parachute to fall back on, like you better go.
War. I like this idea that you don't have a safety net, but that creates the pressure to make it work.
Bet on yourself. And like,
Yeah.
it must be that we had all of this practice. I think that's kind of who we are innately. Like we drive that way. We want to be better. We seek greatness. We study things. We in so many different parts of life, and that crosses over. It doesn't just stop with athletics. It doesn't just stop with academics. It crosses over into other things, and that betting on yourself is also exciting.
Yeah.
Like
And-
you don't have to rely on anyone else.
And the one thing, some people would say no safety net, but actually, like, we did have a safety net, and that was going back to our normal lives. So a lot of people think like, oh, it's so insane. Why would you do that? Well, I mean, you guys are in, San Francisco, probably know Tim Ferriss and his tools of, his book and everything. One thing is like fear setting. And we had a plan B, just even for France, we had a plan B. It was, if we don't like it, here's what we're going to do. Same thing with this was, if we don't have success, we didn't really have like a hard cutoff, but when we took the trip, we knew like worst case scenario, we come back and we get jobs where we are. And for most people out there, okay, so you might think, well, I just got, like you had just moved into, Daniel, you moved into a management position. Hypothetically, someone might be in management. Well, you may not be able to go back to your own company, but most likely your company would take you because they know you're a good worker. They've already vetted you. It's not going to take time. And like maybe you don't get the same role. Maybe it's a level below. But there's so many ways to get back onto this track that you're already on that people are so afraid to get off.
That's kind of how you thought about it.
That's a great point. And I think, something we don't say, but there was an idea of like, well, if this doesn't work, then I'll go back into a fashion company, or he'll go back into another tech company. It wasn't, if we had felt that it wasn't working after a certain amount of time, we would not keep going after it. There's a limit, like, yes, resilience and all of that. But there's a point where, you hit where you're like, this wasn't the idea, and that's okay. And we can be smart enough to Control Z and go back to the workforce until we're ready to come back out again. And that was very much, that was the unspoken. It wasn't even unspoken. It just wasn't publicly spoken. We talked about it like, yeah, of course. And, in my mind, I had thoughts around like, well, how many years could I explain my absence from the workforce? And I kind of, if this didn't work, and surely I could, spin the narrative of all the things I learned while we were trying to launch this. And I could say, which was true, like, I'm focusing more on parenthood and this and that. And I'm like, people do pauses all the time and they come back. And so that was, you're right, that was the safety net. We always knew we weren't like suddenly losing all of our skills and background by doing this. We were actually adding to it. And there would be a moment, each year where we would, kind of look at each other and be like, does it make sense to keep going? It still makes sense, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. And so Scott, like, to go back to, maybe the audience who, for those who are on the fence and wondering, a lot of the thought process sometimes is, what's the downside scenario? And maybe it's that, same thought process when deciding to move to Europe. And, what's the worst case scenario? It could go badly, but the worst case scenario is not devastating.
Permanent. Yeah. It's
And even if it ends up badly, there's going to be good that comes out of that journey. And that's not worthless too. That's valuable in its own right.
Yeah. Most learning and growth comes out of difficulty. That's
100%.
Yeah. So whether the result is what we wanted it to be, we're going to grow from that. There's just no way we wouldn't.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I think we will end it on that. So thanks so much.
The ethos of your entrepreneurship. I love it. Thank you for sharing all about your journey from concept to creation to distribution and all of the parts in between.
This was so much fun.
I feel like we need a quarterly with you.
We just want to talk to you again. But thank you so much for this time. And we wish you both so much luck and love and strength in the coming weeks as you prepare to welcome your next little one.
Yeah.
Thank you. And tell everybody where they can find No Reception Club.
Oh, yes. You can find us online at noreceptionclub.com. And we also have a very active Clubhouse community of over 11,000 parents on Facebook that you can find if you just look up No Reception Clubhouse.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. These are great free ways to support this podcast. Also, please subscribe to this podcast on both Spotify and Apple. On both of those platforms, you can leave us up to a 5-star review, which would help us out greatly. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned in today's episode. That's the best way to support this show. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please put those in the comment sections in YouTube. And yes, we do read all the comments.